Hi everyone, my name is Dave and welcome to Extra Credit, a video series where we take an unscripted look at topics related to local history and exploring that history. All right, before we get into today's episode, this is just a quick reminder to please make sure that you visit my website. There's a link in the description below. My website has all kinds of great information related to my explorations and related topics to that. Also a reminder that I have a lot of content that goes out on social media, so please make sure that you follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. As well, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button. There's a lot of content that goes on to this YouTube channel, and it doesn't always come out right away on places like social media. So by subscribing, you'll get all of the latest content quicker than anybody else. All right, so today's episode is all about technology. And certainly it seems kind of a little bit of a contrast when you're talking about technology related to history. But certainly technology plays a very important role in our exploration of history, and in particular, when you're doing any outdoor exploration with regard to technology. And so today's episode is all about GPS. So basically, to give you kind of a little background, I think a lot of you are familiar with the concept of GPS. You mean basically the global positioning system, which essentially was pioneered for a military application quite a number of years ago. I think the work on the system began in the 1970s and progressed in the 1980s, and kind of really first it made its sort of, I guess, big military debut in the early 1990s during the first Gulf War, when it was used to help sort of locate troops in kind of the featureless desert out in the Persian Gulf area. Eventually what happened was the technology, like a lot of things, was basically modified for a civilian use. And the first GPS units began kind of appearing on the scene kind of mid to late 90s. I don't know the exact date, but I know from a educational standpoint that GPS began being included in sort of school curriculum and introducing students to that around about the time that I started teaching. I can remember, basically, when I first started out, teaching geography and basically, being exposed to, GPS units, certainly not like the ones that we see today. The early GPS units were quite interesting. There was obviously the technology was sort of brand new. They were fairly crude. There were some technological limitations with regard to them. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, and if I'm remembering this correctly, essentially there was a built-in error with regard to the GPS units. I believe it was called selective availability, and essentially what it was the country that had basically pioneered the technology and at the time really had all of the satellites that the global positioning system utilized, which was the United States, was worried about the technology kind of getting into the wrong hands and the wrong people kind of utilizing the technology. And so the civilian versions of GPS units had a built-in kind of error to them. And so when you were using GPS, if I remember correctly, you really couldn't, they weren't accurate. They weren't particularly accurate. Like there was, you were getting like, error, a margin of error within about 100 feet, which, isn't terrible, but when you're trying to specifically locate a place, obviously that presents some big challenges. And I can't remember what year, and I'll put it up on the screen, that basically the American government ended the selective availability, computational error, and then basically GPS units started getting more accurate from that point onwards. And again, so my introduction to technology was basically through school. And again, I can remember those early units, and I'll flash a picture up on the screen. I'm pretty sure this is one of the earliest units that I had an opportunity to take a look at. And essentially there wasn't much on there. Basically, you had this GPS receiver that could kind of record sort of latitude and longitude. I can't remember what else was on there, if there was things like elevation and stuff like that, but there was no sort of graphical interface on there. There was no built-in map or anything like that. And then eventually what ended up happening as time went on, they started incorporating maps and things like that. Again, the accuracy of the GPS got better. And certainly that made them a lot more, sort of user friendly. There was a lot more you can do, particularly when you had maps on there, right? So now you could, sort of, reference them with certain points and things like that. And so essentially I had the opportunity to kind of play with these GPS units a little bit, through sort of the educational application. And then eventually I decided to sort of, buy my own to aid in my explorations and things like that. And I think on, previous episodes, I'm thinking back to the photography one where I was talking about, when I would go out and do these explorations. And, at the time it was very difficult to sort of figure out exactly where you were. I can remember carrying copies of topographic maps. And again, if I have if I remember, I'll basically flash copies of these maps, and if I still have them, and I can remember there was one that, looked like it had been to war, right? It had been folded so many times, and I had sort of tucked it into my gear, and the edges were all kind of mangled on it, and, just really, really beat up. But basically, you're kind of just sort of guessing where you are. And that was challenging, again, when you're trying to record photo locations and things like that, and essentially trying to pinpoint exactly where certain things were. And so essentially what I did was to learn the technology a little bit better. I began, taking, the GPS units home with me on the weekend and, over the summer and things like that. So I could learn how to use the technology and, in the meantime, use them kind of, on my railway explorations and see what the capabilities of the device were. And it was amazing, what I was able to accomplish with the device. And I was actually able to try out a lot of different GPS units. Basically, we had you're buying them kind of over time at school, right? So models change and things like that, and you're trying to sort of get the sort of the latest technology. So we had a kind of a different cross section of different units, including ones that had things like touch screens on them. So I had an opportunity to try out some of the touchscreen models, and eventually I ended up purchasing the model that I currently use right now. This is a product that is put out by Garmin. Garmin is one of the biggest GPS manufacturers in the world, make all kinds of different models and things like that. So this model is it's got to be now over 10 years old. So this is an eTrex 30 model. I believe that a bunch of years ago was replaced by an eTrex 30X. Again, Garmin makes all kinds of different GPS units. They make, obviously, the newer ones have better resolution on the screen. The screen is bigger, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, I like this one because it was very compact. It just fit into my gear really, really well. It was pretty decently accurate. Most of the functions are controlled, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about this. Most of the functions are controlled by the little buttons on the side and the little toggle here. One of the things I found with being able to experiment with all the different types of models, particularly with the touchscreen one, is the touchscreen ones were great, but what I found was that hiking, it wasn't particularly conducive, or at least the type of hiking that I'm doing where I'm, kind of getting really rough and tumble. I found that, a lot of times it's hot, I'm getting sweaty, my hands are sweaty, my hands are getting dirty. I found that I was touching the screen, and it's just like using it with your, with your phone, right? Where you start getting streaks and things on your phone and then all of a sudden now you start getting kind of, a film kind of building up on the screen where it makes it very difficult that the touch isn't responding as well because, there's dirt and grime and things like that on the screen. So that's what kind of pushed me away from using sort of the touch screen model. Again, there's a lot that's changed since I've bought this particular model, but again, it served me well, and for the most part, I don't really need anything much better than this. I'll sort of give you kind of a little rundown of sort of the model. You can kind of see the size in comparison to my hand, so it does fit nicely into my hand. There's basically 2 buttons on the one side, and then there's 3 buttons on the other side. This button here is the power button, so I will power the unit up. And then basically that button is, again, obviously the on and off button. And I'll let it boot up here. And so this is the main screen. This, by pressing the power button as well, is it basically gives you all the information here. Shows you the time and date, and it also shows you the GPS reception, the battery level, and then I can toggle the brightness of the screen here. Most of the features are done by this little toggle button here. So essentially it allows you to sort of toggle through the different screens, and by clicking it, it brings you to the main screen here. This is kind of like the back button on the one side here, so it sort of brings you back. And then the ones on the side here allow you to kind of either kind of zoom in and zoom out of maps or access a menu on the particular maps. I do have a lanyard attached to it. It does have the little sort of attachment point for the lanyard. On the back, this is actually an optional accessory. So this part here is optional. So what this is basically it slides on just like so. Oops. And then it basically has this little attachment point at the back where it would attach onto any type of clip. So you could basically clip it to your gear. So for many, many years, I actually had a clip that would clip onto my tactical vest. And we did an episode where you saw basically my tactical vest. The only problem is in that episode, you did see that I did get a new vest. Now the problem is that little clip didn't really stick very well to my tactical vest. And last spring when I was hiking, I had my GPS attached to it, and it pulled everything right off my vest. And then at some point I lost that little clip, so I'm going to have to replace it and figure out a new spot to kind of put it on there. It was great because it would kind of just sit right here on my vest where it was really, really, really accessible. So anyway, so that clip comes off, and then basically on the back here you have this one little compartment here where you essentially attach the USB cable, and that allows you to download and upload data from the GPS. I believe a lot of the newer models are wireless, so you can do that without having to attach it. And then basically you have the battery compartment here, so it opens up. And so I'm currently using rechargeable batteries. Obviously, I believe the newer models have built-in lithium ion batteries that you can basically just sort of recharge the whole unit. The only issue that I would have with those is that I find, and we're going to actually go outside and we're going to do a little outdoor segment, is that when it gets really, really cold, the battery performance kind of drops. And what you're going to find is that, if once the thing's dead, it's dead. If it has a sort of built-in battery, I like these ones where it does have the separate batteries, because what I can do is when my rechargeables die, I can pop them out and pop in just regular batteries, or I can pop in some lithium batteries. So basically I can keep the unit working even when the rechargeable batteries kind of go down. And for the most part, the charge on the battery lasts decently. I actually just replaced the rechargeable batteries. I had the one set of rechargeable batteries for years and years and years, and they sort of served very, very well. The GPS unit, again, I don't know. One of the reasons why I really haven't changed the units is I don't think it's going to get, a newer model is going to get particularly more accurate. Basically, what I find with this unit is on any given day. So right now, it's telling me my accuracy indoors. It's giving me about 7 meters. Which is basically, it's a radius, it's a circle. And so obviously if you convert that into feet measurements, right now down to 6, right? So you basically got about a 20-foot accuracy. Outdoors, I'm ranging probably in about the 3 to 4 meter accuracy. Sometimes if you can get into an open area and where you're kind of stationary for a little bit, you're down to 2 meters, right? So on a good day, my accuracy is running anywhere from, roughly about 6 feet to about 15 feet, which for the most part, for a lot of what I'm doing, I'm not building some sort of skyscraper or something like that where I need, centimeter accuracy. And they do make those units, right? They do make GPS units that you can get down to centimeter accuracy. But for the most part, even here on doors, like right now, the GPS is showing me a 4 meter accuracy, right? So we're running, just about in that 13, 14 foot accuracy indoors, which is which is pretty darn good. I do have software that's loaded on here. So in addition to the preloaded maps, I do have additional software on the GPS unit. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a second episode, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the software that I use and how I interact with the software, how I manipulate it on my computer, and how I get some of the data off the GPS onto my computer, and then vice versa, because there's a whole kind of art to that as well. So essentially what we're going to do is very shortly here, we're going to head out. Just one more little touch about the accuracy. What's happened in really over the last sort of 20 years since GPS units have sort of become commercially available is the technology in terms of the accuracy of the GPS has increased quite dramatically. So I mentioned already about the select availability being changed, but basically in the beginning there was only one GPS network that was available. Basically that was the American system, and then essentially what's happened over time is essentially there's been some other systems that have gone online. So Russia basically launched their own satellite network, and that satellite network is known as GLONASS. So this GPS receiver has the ability to, so if I go into the setup here, and I go into the, sorry, just give me a second here. I got to find it here. Into the system, right? So essentially you can see here on the screen, it says GPS plus GLONASS, right? So I can basically just use the GPS, just the global positioning system, or I can use it in both, using both GPS and GLONASS. And what that basically means is that instead of using just one global positioning system, I'm using multiple global positioning systems. And so what that does is it basically means that I am tracking way more satellites. And that's one of the reasons why the accuracy of the device has increased quite dramatically. And what's happened, I don't know if it's online yet. It's supposed to be online, but the European Union was supposed to be launching their own GPS system called Galileo. That was supposed to be coming around on this time. And so basically you can kind of see here, because remember the satellites are orbiting, right? So you can't just keep tracking the same satellite. It has to switch from satellite to satellite. And so you'll notice here on, basically mine has a little colored display, and you can basically see what satellites I'm tracking, the signal strength of the satellites, right? So, I mean, certainly that gives you an idea of kind of what is going on. And again, right now I'm sitting at about a 5 meter accuracy in terms of my satellite reception. All right, so what we're going to do is, as I mentioned, we're going to do something a little different, and we're going to go and do a little bit of field work. So we're actually going to go outdoors, and there's no sense talking about a GPS if you actually don't go outside and kind of play with it a little bit in sort of the real environment. So we're going to head outside, and we're going to go. I'll do a little bit of work, and then we'll come back inside and sort of debrief a little bit, and then. And the episode. So I'm going to have to put on a little bit more clothes. It's a little bit chilly outside, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get outside. All right, so we're out here for our first ever kind of field portion of Extra Credit. We're standing here on the grade of what once was the Canadian Northern Railway, and later Canadian National Railways, Dorian and then Kinghorn subdivision, which has been sort of the subject of a lot of our hikes and explorations as of late. Where we are, it's hard to kind of pan back that way, but we're actually here at Pass Lake, right where Pass Lake Station is. You can kind of see some of the rocky bluffs here of the Sibley Peninsula. You can see the speed marker here that's still standing. And so the grade here is kind of stretching over here to the east, as it works its way back that way, eastward towards Pearl Station. This used to be right here, used to be the siding at Pass Lake. So the part here that's kind of to our south, to my right, we can kind of see our location here because we do have a box where the fiber optic cable is. And so it says 170.33, so that's the mileage on the Kinghorn. And so the original lines would have been less, would have been 49.7 miles less. So that becomes 120.6. All right, so a couple things. So we're here going to be trying out the GPS. We're also going to be taking a look at this new GoPro camera that I have. So I just bought a new GoPro. So this is kind of its first little field test. And what's neat is if you watched our previous episode, So I'll put a link to the previous video. And so the previous video was all about winter hiking. And so I actually have some of my winter hiking gear on if you watched that episode. If not, you can take a look at this one. So you can see here that I've got my, I don't know if you can see, I gotta turn this way back into the sun, otherwise you can't see anything. So I've got my boots on, I've got my gaiters on, actually a little catastrophe, 2 catastrophes today. So first of all, yesterday when I went to go take Luna for a walk, I noticed that the seam was coming apart here on my boot, and I actually had to glue it back together. The other catastrophe was I don't know if you can see, if I can pan back this way, I went to go park, and I went to go pull over, and the ditch was a little bit closer than I thought, and I actually kind of went into the ditch, and I had to get a passerby to pull me out of the ditch. So many thanks to that kind gentleman who pulled me out of the ditch. Now what I can do here is this one actually has a front-facing camera, and so you can actually I can actually see what I'm recording here, so you can actually see my gear as we described in the last episode. So in addition to the boots and the gaiters, you can see my glasses, my toque, got my buff on. It's a little chilly outside today. I'll flash the temperature up from this morning. It was very, very cold this morning. It was like in the -30 range. Right now it says it's my truck said it was -15. My phone says it's -16 out here. Checking the weather app, so it's a little crispy. So this is a good little test for the GPS. Good little test for my GoPro camera here. All right, so let's pull out the GPS here, and let's see what we got here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the main screen here, and so I got to pull up my glasses here because I can't see anything, and I have no idea if you can see any of that. So here's the main screen, and if I click on this, it brings us to the map screen, and probably some glare there. It's hard with my gloves on. Hold up. Trying to work the camera and this with my gloves on. So I don't know if you can see that. So basically our accuracy is 4. You can see the map here. And so essentially these buttons here on the side let me manipulate the map. We can go back. And this is kind of hard to do with, if we go down here to the trip odometer, actually if we go to setup, and we go to reset, and we can reset both the track, so it, you know, basically following our track, and reset all of the trip data. So we're going to reset that. Battery's holding up, says 65%. All right, so we'll go back here, we'll go back to our map, and ooh, GPS accuracy just went for a poop. So it says it's 8. And that's why I wanted to come here, because we're going to get into some spots where it's there's going to be some rock cuts and things like that, and that kind of plays around with the GPS accuracy quite a bit. So you can see the map, you can see it shows, so you can manipulate the screen. Basically you can manipulate all the data that you see on the screen here, so you can change the data fields you can see on there. So right now I have the GPS accuracy, which I like to know. It shows me the heading, so which direction I'm heading. So right now the GPS is pointing at we're almost heading north here. The elevation and the trip odometer, and then I have all of the data here on my screen. Now by manipulating the toggle here a little bit, what I can do is I can move the screen around, and it basically shows me wherever the pointer is, the distance is from my particular location. Okay, so let's start kind of walking along here. We're going to walk along to the east. Again, what's nice about this GPS is I can, for the most part, manipulate a lot of things with my gloves on. You can hear some water running. There's a little creek that flows over. Luna's just like so excited to be out here. We're back down to look, we're even at, I don't know if you can see that. So we're back down to 3. So the GPS has figured itself out. There's a little creek that comes down the side of the ridge there, and you can hear the water running. kind of neat at this time of the year. So you can see the water here kind of flowing underneath the railway grade. Ooh, once you get off the main trail here, snow's a little on the deeper side. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we'll fast forward here a little bit, and I'll get you into some heavy cover here into a rock cut and see what the GPS does. All right, so we've walked a little bit, and so here we're getting into an area where we're about to get into some rock work, and generally the rock cuts are sometimes problematic. It really kind of plays and messes with the GPS a little bit. Just a second ago, so right now you can see that the GPS is showing 5 meters. Just a second ago it was showing 3, so it's already kind of affecting things. So let's walk a little through. So again, you can see here our elevation. Now the altimeter is kind of hit and miss. I do try to calibrate it. If I kind of know the altitude, I do try to calibrate it. You can see our odometer there. So we've walked about, since I reset it, it's about 641 meters. You can see the accuracy is just going here. You can see our heading. So we're heading, and that's kind of going a little crazy too. So let's see it, let it steady up here. So, wow, it's all over the place. I think a lot of that has to do with the cold, and it's just, yeah, there we go. We're steadying up a little bit. So we're probably heading about 78 degrees, 80 degrees. So here we're getting into this massive rock cut. And I'm going to put a link up. We were here last spring. So in April, you can see all the snow. You can see all the ice coming down the side of the cut. The GPS is holding steady here. It's about 5 meters. You can see all the ice coming down the side of the cut. Luna's just having a blast here, going through the snow. And so I'll put a link up. We were here, as I mentioned, last April, doing one of our full railway explorations. So if you haven't seen one of my railway explorations, you'll have a link to that, and you can see that. So how's the GPS doing? It's holding okay. We're seeing still about 6 meters. The battery's not doing too bad as well. So if I click on the side here, and you can see the battery. So I still got 2 bars of battery, which isn't too bad. The GoPro's holding up pretty good. The battery isn't draining as fast as I thought it would. Again, just very beautiful in this rock cut in the wintertime. Actually, we're back down to 4 meters, which is good. One of the big sort of telltale things is when you get into the sort of heavy cover, when you get into the trees, that really messes with the GPS a bit. Sometimes when you're trying to locate something that's off the path and you don't get a really clear view of the sky, that's where you sort of run into some issues sometimes. So what we'll do is we'll stop here, and then we're going to backtrack a bit. There's a little trail just back over there, and we're gonna head down the trail and see if we can try to mess with the GPS here. Okay, so we're back here at the start of this rock cut, and so we're gonna head down this trail. Just taking a look at the GPS, it's showing me 4 meters right now. It will be nice kind of going down this trail, because walking back this way into the wind is not nice. It's a little chilly. It's going to be kind of interesting here because the snow's a little deep. This trail isn't really packed. Luna's doing kind of her best otter imitation here. So let's get into some cover here and see how she performs. Still showing me 5 meters. I don't want to venture too much off the trail because it's deep. And that's, well, look, see, of course it doesn't do it when you want it to, right? So now it's telling me 4 meters. What I generally find as well is if you happen to tilt the GPS down that kind of messes with it as well. That if it's not directly pointed at the sky. And of course it doesn't want to, you know, typical. When I want to try to mess with it, it doesn't want to do it. And then, you know, when I need it to be accurate, right? Just technology, gotta love it. Now it's sort of giving me 6. So let's head back onto the trail here. So now we're up at the 7 mark. Luna misses hiking here. Yeah, we're back down to 4. So anyway, so this is our little field test of our GPS. And so hopefully you've enjoyed this little sort of outdoor adventure. It's nice for me to get out kind of on the railway grade here. So we'll head back inside for our final comments. All right, so I was on my way home and had to stop at the grocery store for my wife and realized that I forgot to show one of the most basic functions of the GPS and one of the things that I use all the time, which is how to create a waypoint. So I'm going to do that for you right now in the grocery store parking lot. All right, so it's really easy. So basically what we get to do is we're going to use this button up here. I'm going to try to manipulate the button. Sorry. You just hold down the toggle button here, and so what it does is it basically prompts you with this screen. And so from here you can essentially manipulate some of the entry points, so you can see the latitude and longitude, you can see the elevation. And so essentially by toggling, using the toggle switch here, you can do things like you can get to the symbol, right? And so these are this Garmin GPS has basically transportation symbols. See, these are some of the more common ones that I would use. And so basically that's the symbol that I use for a rock cut. Those are basically most of the general railway symbols that I use. This is essentially the symbol that I use for any type of culvert or bridge or anything like that. And then if we go back, essentially here, then we can basically enter any of the information about the point. And so we can enter, usually I use sort of short phrases, short little code words, right? So for example, if it was a culvert, basically I would, you know, if it was a certain type of culvert, I would use a short form, like say if it was made of concrete, I would CON, and then I would assign it a number. If it was a rock cut, I use an R. If it's some sort of cut, it's a C. Telegraph pole is a T. Usually a TL, because then you can have ties and things like that. Again, there's all kinds of different things that you can use if you wanted to enter that data. And then basically once you're done, you just click the done button, and then there you've entered your waypoint. All right, so now we can actually go back inside and finish our little sort of debrief from our outdoor portion. All right, so hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode and our little adventure outside. We're going to be doing another episode, as I mentioned, in the future, more about GPS, in particular the software and kind of how it interacts with computer and how I get that information back and forth from the computer to the GPS. There's a lot of kind of behind the scenes work that goes on when you know, I'm preparing to do hikes and things like that, particularly if there's something specifically that I'm looking for. Anyway, we'll be back next month with another episode, so please stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in and stay safe, everyone.